good to be back with you after a couple of Sundays away. It's funny how the rhythm, you have to sneak back into it. This past week, I had the opportunity to sail up to Santa Cruz Island. It's one of the Channel Islands just off the coast from Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful place. The weather was next to perfect, quite a bit cooler than it is this weekend. I met up with a group of friends up there for a couple of hikes on the island. It's actually the least visited national park. A little bit of trivia for you. Dinner on some other boats, and there may have been a cocktail hour or two on the boats. What I appreciated most about the time was the spaciousness of it. Not just being on the open water and outdoors. I'm talking about spaciousness of time and of mind and of heart. The trip took 15 hours to get there and the same to return. And doing anything on a boat like that just takes longer. Life is slower. On my tiny boat, everything is miniature scale. You don't have most of the conveniences you do at home, and the whole thing is wobbling a little bit, sometimes a whole lot. So just making coffee or changing clothes becomes a whole task in itself. It's not particularly hard or uncomfortable. It just all takes longer, and you settle into the pace. One of my markers for a successful vacation is not knowing what day of the week it is. And I slipped into that not knowing especially easily this past week. So as we wrap up summer, yes, you heard that correctly, as we begin to wrap up summer, many of us have had opportunities for vacation, for days that were not so filled with tasks and errands. Perhaps most of us remember summer days of childhood, days that stretched on for epic adventures, days that were not packed, but wide open for the imagination and opportunity. So as I return from time away, and perhaps as you return from the spaciousness of your summer, I'm much more aware of the fullness of life these days. There is fullness in a good way. Fortunately, my life is full of work that I love and friends and things to do that I love, but it's also full in the sense of not much room to breathe or to wonder or wander. The solitude and quiet of a more natural pace of life made me very aware of how tightly wound our schedules are and how overstimulated our brains are most of the time. Something magical happens when we give our mind some wide open space. In her poem, Invitation, Mary Oliver writes, "Oh, do you have time to linger for just a little while out of your busy and very important day for the goldfinches that have gathered in a field of thistles for a musical battle, to see who can sing the highest note or the lowest, or the most expressive of mirth, or the most tender? Their strong, blunt beaks drink the air as they strive melodiously, not for your sake, and not for mine, and not for the sake of winning, but for sheer delight and gratitude. Believe us, they say. It is a serious thing just to be alive on this fresh morning in the broken world. I beg of you, do not walk by without pausing to attend to this rather ridiculous performance. It could mean something. It could mean everything. It could be what Rilke meant when he wrote, "You must change your life." In her poem, Mary Oliver practically begs us in the voices of those sweet birds to take some time and linger. Partake in what is offered so freely. Especially now, especially when much of what we see and hear about is brokenness, we can choose instead occasionally to feast on what is offered up to us. Simply making space to notice life's abundance can be a moment of revolution. Our theme for this month in worship is the act of invitation. And I propose to you that there are two necessary pieces of the act of invitation. The first part we often forget. The first part of invitation is making space, whether that's for people or for values. To invite someone or something in, we have to ensure that there is space to welcome them first. The second part of invitation is being specific about what you welcome. You see, there's a difference between an announcement and an invitation. It's the difference between anyone who wants to can come, all are welcome. And Celia, Peggy, Keith, it would mean a lot to me if you were there, because there is a seat with your name on it. It's like the old ad campaign. I had to look it up, so it may not be that successful as an ad campaign. But apparently Motel 6, since 1986, has closed their ads with the warm statement, "We'll leave a light on for you." It suggests you, in particular, are the one that is expected. Today we're talking less about inviting a particular person and more about inviting an intention or a value, particularly the value of love. Once we've made a little space in our schedule or in our hearts, then we can set our sights on what we're seeking. And what we pay attention to tends to grow. Our attention is incredibly powerful. Lynn Edris tells the story of shopping with her husband. They had gone to a huge outdoor store. It might as well have been Costco or IKEA, but I think she's alluding to Bass Pro Shop. I hear from my parents that they have a restaurant and like a whole small lake where you can actually fish in the store. So she says, it's the type of place that was totally overstimulating and overwhelming and incredibly distracting. She was half paying attention when her husband said, "I'm going to go look at the..." But his attempt at communicating trailed off before she was too distracted to pay attention until she noticed he wasn't there. She was walking the aisle, scanning the store, and she remembered, right, he was wearing a red shirt. Perfect. And all of a sudden, like magic, there were red shirts everywhere. On shoppers, on racks, on shelves. Suddenly red seemed to be the predominant color in the store. A busload of red-shirted shoppers had not just been dropped off in the parking lot, nor had it suddenly become Valentine's Day or Christmas season. She had just used her mental magic, her focus to seemingly bring a wave of red shirts into her presence. And so it goes with our emotional energy as well. When we focus on the negative, our mind and our attention is naturally drawn to find and notice more negative. When we focus on the positive, our mind and attention is naturally drawn to find and notice more positive. Perhaps more easily said than done, I know. But that's the sort of self-fulfilling feedback loop that the power of attention has. rather than trying to monitor our every thought and our every deed. Focus on the good. Focus on joy. Focus on love. Just focus. Instead of applying more pressure, perhaps consciously starting the day or ending the day with remembering a few things that you're grateful for can get that momentum going. It doesn't have to be a grand, poetic piece of gratitude. I've gone to bed many nights thankful for the ice cream that I just ate, or getting into bed with a clean, fresh set of sheets. Getting in the habit of noticing and naming the small things is surprisingly powerful. One part of invitation is making space. The second part of invitation is being clear about what we are welcoming into our lives. In that exercise I just described, hopefully some of the things that you are grateful for in those mornings or evenings are people. Reverend Kathleen McTeague offers a simple path to inviting love. She writes, "Fear's pronoun is singular. I've got to watch out for me and mine. Love's pronoun is plural. We're in this together. And together we can grow things that will blossom even in a time of drought." I love that type of awareness. Are we focused on our singular personal concerns, or are we doing our best to zoom out to wider and wider circles? One way of inviting love into the center is thinking more in terms of we, us, all of us. Fear's pronouns are singular. I, me, mine. Love's pronouns are plural. Another way of inviting love to the center is paying attention to who is invited in those plural pronouns. Who does the we include? Who specifically are we inviting into the center of the circle? Because those people out there on the margins have some pretty amazing stuff going on. The writer Rebecca Taussig focuses on telling different stories in a different way about disability and marginalization. She writes, "When I was small and just learning how to do life in my body, I didn't hesitate, didn't hold back, didn't worry how it would look. I was entirely free to be, driven by the innovation my body inspired. This is the wild emancipation I wish for all of us. A world where we are all free to be, to move, to exist in our bodies without shame. A world that isn't interested in making all of its humans operate in the exact same way. A world that instead strives to invite more, include more, imagine more. That world sees humans existing on the margins and says, you have what we want. What barriers can we remove so that we can have you around? What do you need? How can we make that happen?" It's not often that we look at people on the margins and say, you have what we want. Whether that's a different view of life, or a freedom of inhibition, or the sense of generosity that so often is born out of having little to share, or letting go of shame and respectability. You have what we want. So we begin to be more specific with our invitation. Beyond all our welcome, we say, my gender expansive siblings, there is a place for you here. Or our friends who use wheelchairs, there is quite literally place set for you in our seating arrangement. Our neighbors who are short on luck and short on cash, please come and help us eat the abundance of this potluck today. You have what we want. We are more whole when we are together. One way of inviting love to the center is inviting the margins to the center. Now, some people hear love, that big, broad, squishy word, and it raises concerns of vulnerability and being taken advantage of. And it's true. Love can feel foolish. Sometimes it is foolish. It is soft in a way, perhaps even weak. I try, when possible, to keep in mind the type of power that I have in relationships at hand, especially when love is on the table. It turns out that I was born as a white, cisgendered man in the 21st century post-industrial America. With an able body and heaps of formal education, I walk in the world armed to the teeth with an arsenal of potential weapons. The weapons of racial privilege, of sexual privilege, of economic privilege. Enacting love is not just about giving up angry words or physical violence. It's also about recognizing those other weapons that I might wield accidentally against anyone I perceive to threaten what I feel entitled to. I am not endangered of being steamrolled anytime soon because I love too much. The risk of vulnerability that comes with putting love at the center pales in comparison with the lifelong work of putting down the weapons that I was born with. Obviously, I'm speaking of my own experience and my life position. When the question of love arises, when we're asked to make ourselves vulnerable to the other, or to assume the best, or to be generous, or to be willing to change for the other, or to lend our resources in the name of justice, we have to ask, who is truly at risk here? A useful understanding of love takes the power in the relationship seriously. Whether that's in our own home or in our neighborhood or around the world, to do the loving thing requires to start where we are in the current relationship. I know that there is a time and a place to say no, or this is mine, or you will not hurt those people. The handful of you who have been with me at protests have heard my very loud no on occasion. I also know that my no comes much more quickly than it needs to most of the time. So in this sermon about inviting love into the center, finally, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention universalism. For hundreds of years, our faith has believed that God's love is too big to leave anyone behind. Universalism isn't about human beings being too good for God to punish. No, universalism is about God's love being too big, too universal to punish anyone eternally. For most of us, that sense of big, bold, universal love goes beyond a concern of salvation after life to understanding that even in this life, we are all in this together. In reality, no one is outside of the circle. Too often, we Unitarian Universalists think ourselves as even-keeled, scientific, liberal thinkers. But sitting here today, in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, you are subscribing to a radically wild faith. It is a big, bold kind of love that says we are willing to be changed, to be transformed through the process of loving our neighbors. That's scary stuff. But we are here to practice inviting love into the center together. Amen.